I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Ryan Hale. Ryan is a retired restaurant general manager and a former telecommunications manager who has been retired for 9 years. He began writing in November 2022 when Antoinette, his wife of 44 years, suggested he stop talking about someday writing a novel and sitting down at the computer and writing one. He first wrote Memoirs of an Air Force Brat. The process was so enjoyable, he then wrote his first fiction novel, The Year of the Rat, a COVID origin novel, in just over 2 months. He loved the experience of daily commitment to writing and penned the first in the series of the Blake Franklin Investigations books. One for the Money was his debut into the mystery series genre, and he has already published 2 for the Show, 3 to Get Ready, and Go Cat Go, a 4-part disharmony, 5 Will Get You 10, and 6 Degrees of Desperation. Ryan puts in several hours daily, putting down 30 to 50 pages, and continuously works hard to improve his craft. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you, Kara.
And I'm realizing, hold on, your latest release is Crossing Big Coal River.
That's right. Yeah, that's a book about coal miners in West Virginia. My kinfolk, my relatives, as I was growing up, were all in West Virginia.
Okay.
And we used to go back on summers when on my dad's leave. We'd go back for 30 days at a time and stay up on Coal River with all those folks up there and live the West Virginia mountaineer kind of experience with wells and outhouses and that sort of thing. And it was a great time in my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So being an Air Force brat based off your novel title or your memoir title, did you guys move around a lot as a child then?
We did. Yeah, I went to 14 different schools.
Wow.
From first grade through 12th.
Okay.
The longest we ever lived in one place was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We were there for 6 years.
Okay.
But during that 6 years, we moved 6 times, and I went to 4 different schools while I was there. So
wow.
It was one of those things where you just get used to moving around, and the great thing about it is that you learn to make friends very quickly.
Yeah.
Because everybody's kind of in the same boat, and so had a lot of friends over the years, and some that I haven't seen actually for 50 years, but we will talk on the phone, or we'll get onto Facebook or on text or whatever, and it's like no time has gone by. We're still good friends.
Wow, that's amazing. We're a military family as well. And it's funny that you talk about all these moves. It's just this past weekend, my kids were asking us like about all the places they've lived. And I realized, I'm like, my 3-year-old has moved 4 times. I'm like,
wow.
And he's only 3. So I'm like, oh my goodness. Just so I did not grow up in a military family. So just the dichotomy of my growing up to what their growing up is. But I'm glad to hear you say the positive sides of it, because we're hoping, I mean, for us, it seems to be working for our family right now. We'll see as we keep going along. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I'm sure there were some challenges too, but I mean, one of the things was we had 6 kids in our family. And when you've got a family with 6 kids and your dad's on a staff sergeant's pay, we were living below the poverty line, but we didn't know it. We had no idea we were poor. So it was we had a good life, and the things that are made available to you on Air Force bases to keep the kids busy and out of trouble were great and many. So there's all the athletics and the pools and the bowling alleys and everything that were right there on base that you could walk to. And I remember when I was 7 and 8 years old, we were in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was about a 2-mile walk to go to the movie theater. But for a quarter, we could get in to see the movie, get a box of popcorn and a drink.
Nice.
And so it was a wonderful time.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So, and I think just speaking to your parents, making sure that every summer you would go back to West Virginia and reconnect with your family that lived there, I think that's super impressive as well, because that had to be a lot of travel and planning involved, because living all over the country, I'm sure you were coming from different places.
Yeah, we were. I mean, as far away as Texas and Idaho. So yeah, there were pretty long drives to get back there. And the interesting thing about it was that our relatives in West Virginia didn't have a telephone. So when we showed up with my mom and dad and six kids in tow with our luggage, they had no idea we were coming.
Yeah. Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, we saw a lot of surprised looks,
Yeah.
and not all of them happy surprise either. But it was, yeah, it was
Yeah.
kind
You're
of an
all
interesting time.
here.
Yeah, oh, good.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. We are originally from Chicago, and we were in this habit for so long of going home for over the Christmas holidays, which is just, now that we have kids, and I remember going home one time and it was -30 degrees was the high,
Oh my
with the
gosh.
wind chill of -50. And I was like, and we didn't leave the house for 2 days. Our daughter was, I think, 6 months old at the time. So we didn't leave the house for 2 days, because I'm like, how do you prepare to get a baby outside in
Right.
-50 degrees? And I'm like, okay, this is the last time I'm coming home for Christmas.
Yeah.
We need to change this. So we're going home this summer. We went home last summer. So we've shifted our timeline to be over the summer, because it just is, I have no desire to be back in that level of winter anymore.
Yeah. I'm glad to be at the point in my life where the holiday travel is my kids coming to see us instead of the other
Yeah.
of me going to see my mom and dad. I miss my mom and dad, but I do not miss having to go to two or three different households for Thanksgiving and Christmas and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, you like
challenge.
run yourself ragged, I
Yeah.
think, to do that. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit. So I feel like you had this whole career, you had this whole life, and then you retired and you decided, or your wife maybe pushed you along the path of becoming a writer. Did you
Yeah.
always know throughout your careers that you enjoyed writing, or was it not something you really had
Yeah,
done?
no, I've always written. I mean,
Okay.
and in my memoir, I talk about how the first time I ever wrote something was in second grade, and I was really proud of it. And my teacher gave it back to me on the second day of school, gave it back with an F on the top of it, and said, "I asked you to tell me something that really happened over the summer, not to make something up." And I and it so affected me because 'cause the story was true, every word of it was true. But I went into great detail, and she just thought that I was making it all up.
Oh, wow.
And so the next time I wrote something that got any kind of attention was in sixth grade, and I wrote a poem that ended up being published. And,
Wow.
and my teacher and the principal made a big deal of it, and it was kind of exciting. So since that time, I've always written poetry
Okay.
for special occasions, birthday cards. Most of my wife's cards, I'd get cardstock and fold it up, and I would put a little thing on it that said Hale Mark, and then I would write my original poetry for her.
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
love that.
so I've always done that, and then in the restaurant business, I've always been a trainer as well as a general manager. I was a trainer, and I wrote a lot of training material that was used in the restaurants, and I worked for chains, and it was so I was writing it just not just for my staff, but for the whole company. And then when I got injured and had to leave the restaurant business, I went to work in telecom, and I went there as a trainer and became a technical writer. And so I wrote a lot of training, and did a lot of train the trainer and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I found that I was good at my job because I could take technical issues and write it in such a way that people could understand it when they were coming onto the job right away.
Yeah.
And so I've always enjoyed writing
Okay.
and always dabbled with it, but and talked about, yeah, well, someday I'm going to write a book. But my wife, when my brother-in-law passed away, and we had come back to Texas from his funeral, and I said something about I wrote a poem for for my sister-in-law
Sure.
that was, it touched her and my wife as well, and she said, you've got to write, you've got to put these things in a book, and I said, well, someday. And she said, no, we're getting too old to put anything off until someday. You need to do it today. You need to, if you're going to do it. If you're
Yeah.
not, stop talking about it.
Okay.
So I did it.
All right. And so you were retired at this point. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
you had some time as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. When I was retiring, 9 years ago, I said, oh, I'm finally going to have time to write that book, and I never
And
even
you
wrote a
still,
word
yeah.
until my wife said that, and no excuses, and time's running out, so let's get busy. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
and this is why I love asking this question because I would read your bio and based off just your job titles, I wouldn't assume you would do much writing with that, right? So it's amazing to hear that no, you really did that a lot over the years through these positions.
yeah, and see, I came up in the restaurant business at a time prior to the rollout of computers.
Okay.
And so a lot of the training that we did, we would have slides, and then we put together a script and that sort of thing for each one of the slides. And so I got a lot of experience of writing dialogue and being
Sure.
descriptive about foods and ingredients and all that sort of thing, and about service. And so I had a lot of writing experience there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, okay, so you started with was your first book you started? I know it was the first one, it sounds like published, was the Memoirs of an Air Force Brat. That was the one you started with?
That's right. Yeah. And,
Okay.
and so I just just tapped into the memories, and a lot of it I think is probably memories of memories, because my
Yeah.
mom and dad would always talk, and we'd sit around, and then we'd say, tell me another story, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it'd be the same story that we've heard before, and so those become my memories, as though I lived it. So I was able to go back and tap into that, and it was such a wonderful experience recalling all those things. I'd finish a chapter, and I would be like, oh my gosh, I just remembered this, and I'd go back and add to it or change things up, and it was just a tremendous experience. And the funny thing is that my siblings have read it, and they said, well, that's clearly your memory. It's not the way I remember it, but I said that, yeah, I understand that. Go write your own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's funny how we all hold on to different things and it could be the same exact experience, but in different ways.
yes,
Yeah. And I think as you're talking, like you said, it was such a wonderful experience for you, but I think what a great legacy for your family, right? To have all these stories written down as
yeah,
well.
my daughter was the same way when she was growing up. We would tell stories, and then she would always say, tell me more, tell me more. Let's,
Yeah.
tell me about that one time. And she knew the story as well as I did, but she enjoyed sitting and listening to us talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something about storytelling, right? Not only in the delivery and the repetition, but just as a kid that you did that, right? That just the excitement and you can't believe your parents or your grandparents have done these things in their life and
Right, right. Well,
well,
and going back into to biblical times, that's how the histories were related.
yeah.
Everybody said, because they didn't have the written language so much, and they would sit and they would talk about the lineage of their family, and who begat who. And it's the part of the Bible when I read it, I was like, oh, okay, cut to the chase. Okay, yeah, that's David's family. But that's the way they shared their family
Yeah.
lineage and their histories. And so it's always been important, and
Yeah.
it was to my kids as well.
I know I laugh as you're talking because my husband, he's a really good storyteller. And I'm the type that adds in all the details and he's like, just get to the point. And so it's good we have each other to balance each other out. But a lot of times I'll just like defer, like, you should tell the story because you'll get there better, more succinctly, especially if we're, in lieu of time. You should probably tell it.
And my wife is like that. She'll start something, and she'll you tell it, you tell it, you tell it
Yeah.
better. So yeah, I've done a lot of storytelling.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I want to take like a course or find a book out there to help me hone my storytelling ability because I love listening to stories and I see it's such a skill and a fun thing to have. But I'm like, how do I improve my storytelling?
Right, right. And that's one of the things I love about writing is because I'm a visual guy. Even though I call myself a wordsmith, I'm very visual.
Okay.
So when I'm writing, I'm in my mind, I'm seeing it happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, it's like watching a movie. And and the same with reading books. When I read a book, when I finish, I feel like I've just sat through the best version of the movie possible. And then there's times when I've read books that have been turned into movies and I was disappointed by the movie, or
Yeah.
I may have enjoyed the movie, but it's like, yeah, but it was quite different from the book. They
Yeah.
really went off in a different direction there. But so I see things that way as I'm writing, and that's why it for me, I'm a very untraditional writer because they say you should have a detailed outline of everything you're going to say and what the characters do, and
Okay.
pardon me, and I don't do any of that. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of a writer, and I see it as I go, and it's like what would the character say in a situation like that? What would happen if that happened instead of this? And I can make some changes and do things on the fly, and that's why I through 10 books, and I'm working on two right now. I haven't gotten writer's block yet, and just because it just comes at me, and it's
Yeah.
it's a visual experience for me.
Right. You're not stopping the flow to try to create this outline or create the characters. Like you're just letting it flow. And that might be the key to your success right there.
Yeah, to the limited success I've had so far, 6 months into the business, I'm finding that the writing is not the difficult thing; it's the marketing
Yeah.
that's a challenge. So it's one of those things where a couple of weeks ago I decided, I think I'm gonna hold off on writing for about 6 months and delve into how to market a book, and as I did so, I found out that I did it wrong. You have to
Oh,
start
no.
marketing them before you even write them. So it's a learning process,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna back off a little bit, although I've got two in the works. Rather than crank a book out in 3 or 4 weeks, I may take 3 or 4 months and just really kind of get into the best way to market it on Google or Amazon or social media or whatever. So,
It's interesting you say that because even in the podcasting world, right, I feel that a little bit. It's like, am I being heard? It's a little, and so I feel
right,
like it's
right.
probably very similar, right? I've been doing this actually the same time as you, but my first episode I came out late November or early December, but I think I started in November, was recording to then edit. So I've been in this about the same length of time. So I'm still learning myself.
We're both newbies. This is
Yes, we are both newbies here. So learning together. I know I've had two other podcasters so far on the show, and I'm like, we should keep in touch because this is kind of a lonely business, like outside of my conversations I have in this format, right? The interview, but then the editing and the creating and the marketing all on the backside is a very solo job.
right,
So we
right,
should keep in touch because I feel like we're having similar journeys and we can share what worked and what didn't work together.
right.
So, where you get your inspiration from.
Yeah. So I started out with the the first one that was the Year of the Rat.
Okay.
And the backstory on that is the pandemic. It's COVID.
Yeah.
Um, but the book itself is about relationships, about the protagonist trying to survive because he gets caught up in in some corrupt things going on between government officials and people in the World Health Organization and that sort of thing. And
Okay.
so he inadvertently becomes a target of those people, and it's all about him trying to survive that and get back. He ends up being stranded in China, and he's got to get back to the States somehow without using his own passport.
Okay.
So so anyway, it's complicated, and he develops relationships along the way, and so it's more about the relationships with COVID as being the backstory.
Okay.
I wrote The Year of the Rat because I had just come back from my brother-in-law's funeral, and he called us the day that he knew when he was going to die, because he was telling them to turn his machines off, and
Wow.
he called us and did a Zoom call, or a FaceTime with us, to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And so we went up to the funeral, and my sister-in-law said, it's so awful how this COVID is just attacking the elderly.
Yeah.
And it gave me the idea that what would happen if the government really did collude with a laboratory for the sole purpose of um, getting rid of the elderly and the sick and the infirmed, so that they could improve the economy. And that was the premise for the book. And I thought, and
Yeah.
I sat down and just started going nuts with it. And it's gotten some decent reviews, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it got a story out of my head and off my heart, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah.
Then I started with the Blake Franklin, and I've always been a guy that enjoys watching cop shows, and watching movies about crime solvers and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so in my mind, I kind of patterned him after some of the private detectives that I'd seen, like growing up watching television, like you're too young to remember this, but there used to be a show called Mannix,
Okay.
and then there was another one called the Rockford Files, and so it was that kind of a character. The modern version of that would be Magnum PI.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so that kind of a guy, and only not quite as cool and wealthy or whatever as a Magnum PI. This guy's not driving a Ferrari, but so it's a Blake Franklin is a Fort Worth cop who manages to fail the detective exam 3 times,
Oh no.
and it's embarrassing for him, um, because his father is the chief of police.
Okay.
And so his father didn't want him to become a cop. He wanted him to do anything else but that. And he has a rich uncle, and his rich uncle has always told him, "Hey, I'll give you the money to do whatever business you want to do." And he's always said, "No, I don't want to be beholden to anybody. I want to do my own thing, be my own man." And
Yeah.
so after failing the detective exam 3 times, out of frustration, he finally accepted his uncle's offer to help him. And he said, "I want to be a detective." And he's like, "Well, I know that, but you failed the test 3 times." So
Yeah.
he goes, "No, no, no. I mean, private. I want to be a private detective." So he said, "Oh, okay." So he helped him get going. And his very first case ends up being a whole lot more than he anticipated.
Okay.
And he ends up getting a lot of attention on social media. And it's interesting that I put the social media slant in there, because um, that's the thing that I'm craving right now too, is getting social media coverage. But Blake Franklin was able to, and
Okay.
it really launched his business, and it launched the next book, and then the next book, and so forth. And so the ideas come to me, and I just think, like, it's like, okay, what would a guy that his whole purpose in life is to help people, to do good. He wants to serve and protect, and he felt like he could do more than he was as a patrol officer.
Okay.
And so now he's got his own business, and he can direct his own activities, and he can set his own policy, and he tries to do everything by the book, and not take shortcuts, and he doesn't pull a gun off of his hip, and he's just trying to do his job and help people, and it
Okay.
and it works out for him.
That sounds really intriguing. I'm going to have to pick these up. So, where can we find your books?
They're all on Amazon,
Okay.
and on Google Books, and on Kobo.
Okay.
and soon they'll be at Barnes and Noble as well, but I haven't done that yet.
Okay. All right. So listeners, I'll have all these links in the show notes as well. But what I love about this, and I feel like so many people love about series, is if you fall into one, you know you have your next books lined up and you're not having to do the hunt for what you're going to read next. So,
Right, right, right. Yeah, I hope that people will if they pick up one, and I think you can't help but fall in love with the characters,
yeah.
and then there's some interesting twist to it, and the one of the more interesting twists occurs right at the end, and it helps with the trajectory of his business.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to be picking that up. And so right now there's the 6 books of that series are published.
right, and
Okay.
I'm working on the seventh book, which the working title is called Seven Seals.
Okay.
And so I chose the title thinking that people might think, well, that sounds like it's got a religious slant to us because it sounds like Revelations, but but it's not.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm
Oh, that
intrigued.
was a spoiler. Sorry about that.
I am very intrigued. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about who you are as a reader. What genres do you prefer to read?
Well, I have always since I started reading in earnest, I was 19 years old,
Okay.
and I hadn't read a book up to that point. If it wasn't assigned to me in a class, I never picked one up. We were one of those households that didn't have any books around. We just
Okay.
didn't. And I can remember bringing my weekly readers home when I was in grade school. And hey, you can get this book for 75 cents. And my dad would say, "Well, I'm not made of money."
Yeah.
And so and I realized that, and so I just never had books around. But when I was 19, I bought a book by Clive Cussler,
Okay.
and it was the Mediterranean Caper. And by the time I read that one, he already had, I believe it was 4 additional books out.
Okay.
And so, just like you said, when you find a book that's a part of a series, you don't have to worry or wonder what's the next book I'm going to read. I couldn't wait,
Yeah.
and it just one after another, and Clive Cussler is such a prolific writer that, I mean, just in one series, which is the Dirk Pitt series, I think he's got 33 or 34 books,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
and I've read them all.
So he's
And
kept you busy for many years.
oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. I mean, between him and Patterson and Clancy, I mean, I've been real busy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So yeah. So I like the adventure
Yeah.
books that Clive Cussler writes, and he has 5 different series. All of them are just rich with adventure, and they're patterned after his life, actually, because
Wow. I
he
didn't
was
know that.
oh yeah,
Okay.
he's a treasure hunter. He's done a lot of salvage work, which is what Dirk Pitt and his Numa group, they go out looking for sunken ships and that sort of thing. And Clive Cussler has done that for 35, 40 years. So
Oh, wow. That is so cool. Okay. I
yeah,
had no idea that it was based off his life.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then, so how in your day, because I know you're writing quite a bit too, how do you find time to read?
I just set aside time, and
Okay.
the reason I've been reading so much lately is because I've been going on these Facebook author groups,
Yeah.
and it's all, there are thousands and thousands of indie authors that are struggling in the same boat,
Yeah.
and so I'm seeing some of their posts, and judging their books by their covers, and saying, yeah, I think I'd like to read that one. And so I've been, like, in the last 2 weeks, I've downloaded 9 books, and I've read 7 of them, and it's, some of them I love, some of them I don't love, but
Yeah.
I've been enjoying that process as well, and being able to go out and give people some rankings on Amazon and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
It's just support the people that are out there doing the same thing I'm doing.
Absolutely. I think that part is huge, right? Cuz like you said, we're all in this path together, and I always feel like offering up the support, right? It's just you feel good about that, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so and then you've been so gracious to prepare a book flight for us today, and you've already kind of alluded to one of your first books in the book flight. So
Yes.
tell us about the first book of the book flight today.
Okay. So the first book in the book flight would be the Clive Cussler series, which is about a character named Dirk Pitt.
Okay.
And the way he describes Dirk Pitt, he's kind of like a Magnum PI guy because he's like 6'4" and dark hair and muscular and green eyes and chiseled and all that kind of stuff. And so I was always picturing him as being that. Of course, when the movies were made, Matthew McConaughey was cast as the Dirk Pitt character, and
Oh,
I
really?
kind of scratched my head about that, and I think Clive Cussler did as well.
Yeah.
Um, but the books are just like rich with action, adventure, and daring, and all that sort of thing. And so I just got so wrapped up in it and looked forward to it. And there's another character that's in the book um, named Al Giordino,
Okay.
and Al Giordino he's described as he's like me for a long time, except that he was Italian with great hair.
Okay.
And I'm West Virginian with very little hair. But big barrel chested, strong guy, and so he's like always had Dirk's back, and so those two characters, I love the way they played off of each other. They were both wise guys like I am, great sense of humor, and so I identified with them for different reasons.
Yeah.
It just I could live the experience with them. So there's that series, and then
Okay. Do the characters persist throughout the novels as well? So you kind of get to know them more in each book?
yeah, absolutely. and
Okay,
and
I love
and,
that.
and so like Dirk in the beginning is a widower. His wife was killed. He then gets married again much later,
Okay.
28 books into it. He gets married, and he's married to a congresswoman. And Al Giordino, he's a player. So
Yeah.
in that way we differ. But as he gets older, as he's writing these books, and I'm thinking, Dirk's getting a little bit old for this.
Okay.
Well, then he finds out that he's got a couple of kids from the wife who was killed, um, and they'd grown up in Hawaii, and so he's got
Wow.
Dirk Jr.
Okay.
and his daughter, and they kind of take over and start doing all of the action adventure and the deep dives and that sort of thing. And so you just like fall in love with his kids and get right into it.
Yeah.
So
I was giggling when you were talking about how Matthew McConaughey was casted as Dirk because there's a mysterious series that I have loved, and I think I'm like 14 books in, and it was recently made into a TV series. And I've only ever read the books as books, right? And I think you create this movie in your head while
absolutely.
you are reading, means you've created these characters. Much to my chagrin, I've probably pronounced some of the names wrong because they live in Canada where they speak French and I don't speak French, so I've probably mispronounced some of the names. Um,
Sweet.
but when I watched the preview for this TV series, I was like, I don't know that I can watch that because that's not the movie I have created in my head around this series. And at 14 books in, you're really invested in these characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was like, I think I'm going to bypass the TV show. I'll keep reading the series because I absolutely love the series, but the TV show probably will not be what I would want to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So when the movie Sahara came out, which is based on Clive Cussler's book, and Matthew McConaughey is in it, and the Al Giordino, the barrel chested, big, strong, fearsome, fighting Italian guy, is a little tiny comedic actor with blonde hair, and he was great in the part,
Sure.
but it had nothing to do with the book.
Yep.
And yeah, I still enjoyed the movie somewhat, but I was like, what? Who did the casting on this? And
Yeah.
and then I read later where Clive Cussler was not very pleased with the way it went, and
Okay.
they made his book Raise the Titanic into a movie, and he was very unhappy with what they did there. So I don't think he's allowing his books to be made into movies anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting that whole process. I mean, that's really a whole world I don't know much about, but you would think they would consult the author a bit more when they're creating that.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
or pay attention to the book when they're turning it into a script.
Yeah.
Just it's too easy to get it right, I would think.
Yeah, especially just in the character. Like
Yeah,
that seems in character casting, that seems
yeah,
a simple, maybe in the dialogue script writing, you might need to change some things, but character casting seems a pretty simple.
yeah,
But that's not a world I know much about. So
yep.
who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt novels. What is the second book of the pairing today?
The second one is the Alex Cross books. They're
Yeah.
James Patterson,
Yep.
and that's another one where I mean, Patterson is such a prolific writer, that he's got 40 books,
Yeah.
just in the Alex Cross books, and then he's got several others, and I've read them as well. But I've just thoroughly enjoyed the Alex Cross. He's a family guy.
Yeah.
He's raising his kids. He's living with Nana Mama. His mother-in-law, I believe, is the actual relationship,
Okay.
from his deceased wife. But they live in Washington D.C., and he's called in as a forensics expert, and just he gets into some really really tight spots, and he surrounds himself with some great friends that are there that have his back, and I just really thoroughly enjoy the whole genre. It's just a wonderful book.
Yeah, it sounds like you can identify with the main character as well, right? Like he's very relatable.
Yeah, he is very relatable, and he's so close to his kids, and he would die for them,
Yeah.
But more importantly than that, he lives for them.
Yeah.
He makes decisions that he makes based on what's good for them, and I think that's what dads ought to do. So I think he's a great role model.
Yeah, I'm as you're talking, I'm like, oh, my husband for until probably 10 the first 10 years of our marriage, he read very sporadically. He's a movie buff. That would be his go-to medium of, hearing stories. And I've always been a reader, but I always will like send a book his way like, I think you might like this. I think you'd really enjoy this. And just recently, since I've started the show, probably in the past 6 months, he found this series of books that he loved. And he was walking around with his Kindle. I've never seen him read like this. And I was cheering inside my head, like, oh my goodness, he's become like this voracious reader. Like 12 years now we've been married. And I'm like, yes, this is so exciting. And, but I know he just has finished the series. He literally went back, he finished it and started it over again. That was how much he loved it.
Wow.
So I'm like, but I think he would probably love this book because now I'm trying to find him another series he'll like, right? Because I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you kind of like. I know you like the thriller, the mystery, but he might really like this from the character that you're describing. So maybe I'll get this for him for Father's Day.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that recommendation.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so that was the Alex Cross series by James Patterson. And
All
then
right.
what is the last book of the pairing today?
The last one is it's Jeffrey Deaver,
Okay.
and he one of his books is The Bone Collector,
Okay.
and all of his books are in the same genre, where there's the forensics cop,
Yep.
and trying to solve crimes and that sort of thing. And there's probably a half a dozen other authors that I bought their full series, but that tend to be the same type of genre. But
Okay.
this guy, Jeffrey Deaver, is so detailed in the way he he sets up the crimes, and I'm as I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, I bet you that's what he's going to use to trip him up. And I
Yeah.
bet you that's it right there. And I'm right about half the time, I guess, but
Yeah.
he does such a wonderful job of leaving little crumbs that you can go,
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to get him now. So I just enjoy it. And the thing that I like about all these books, and it's true in mine, is that the good guy wins.
Yeah.
I never want to make the villain. I had a difficult time with one of my books. I had to make the villain sympathetic just because of the storyline,
Okay.
and it bothered me. It bothered
Yeah.
me to do that because to me a villain is a villain is a villain, and
Yeah.
and there's nothing sympathetic about him. But in book six, I had to.
Yeah.
So it was a new experience that yeah. But with these other authors that I read so much of, the good guy wins, and the good
Yeah.
guy, he gets almost caught, he gets almost hurt, he gets, that sort of thing. But so it's good to live on the edge while you're trying to save the world. But the good guy has to win in my
Yeah.
books.
And I think that's a great part of storytelling, right? It's like the good versus evil and the ultimate story of that, right? And the hero triumphing over evil. And I think that's why we're drawn to stories, right? I think that gives us hope. I think that can inspire so many different feelings in us of that ultimate tale, right? Of the
Right.
hero triumphing.
Right. One of my proofreaders is my wife's sister.
Okay.
And I always send it to her first, and then she gets so into the characters, and it's made her cry, it's made her laugh, and she after the I believe the third book, she said, when are you going to have her get married? Was like, what?
Okay.
I hadn't even thought about that. She's like she did. I just think that she would be so lonely. And I was like, okay, well, so
Yeah.
and she was right. Yeah, they've all got to have complete lives, and so based on her saying that, I went back in and made some changes, and now that character is going to be, she's dating.
Okay.
Like, can't get too serious, but she's dating.
I love that. Yeah, and I love books that make me feel all the emotions, right? As I'm reading them. I to me
Yeah.
that's a sign of a good book.
Yeah. I know I was writing in book six, and I started to read something to my wife because I kind of bounce things off of her every now and then. And I got choked up when I was writing it,
Yeah.
and I got choked up again when I was reading it to her. And then she got choked up listening to it. So
Yeah.
I thought, okay, it's working. this
Yeah.
this is good. So
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and how you can, and I'm just so impressed in how you can put that into words on paper. So,
yeah.
kudos to you.
Well, thank you very
You're
much.
very welcome. Okay, so the last book of the pairing was The Bone Collector by Jeffrey Deaver. And how I love to end the show around here is what I call our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions. So you can just answer these really quick.
Okay.
So, where is your favorite place to read?
Sitting right here in the chair that I'm in.
Love it. All right. And then, what is one book you've read that has changed your life?
I've got to go back to the Mediterranean Caper,
Okay.
with Clive Cluster, because it was at that point that I started reading, and I haven't stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, over the last um, 47 years,
Yeah.
I, I probably have read, 1,000 books or more. Just have always read a lot since then.
Yeah. I love that. Sparked your love of reading. Okay. And then, are you a rereader?
I am not.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then, lastly, what are you reading next?
The next one I'm going to read is um, it's a book by excuse me, Philip Morehouse,
Okay.
and it's called The Mongrel's Boots.
Okay. I haven't heard of that one. The title, though, is interesting.
Yeah, well, and it just came out this past week, and
Okay.
it's about a character that's up in West Virginia.
Oh, cool.
So
Okay.
and it actually, like my my book in West Virginia takes place in 1959, 1960, and his
Okay.
takes place in 1962.
Wow.
And
Okay.
the one the sequel that I'm writing to, Crossing Big Coal River, is also takes place in 62, 63. So I'm just reading it. I'm comparing our dialectic approach and that sort of thing. So
Oh, that's really fun.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all that you've given me.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Kara, truly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation today with Ryan Hale. We'd love to hear what other books you would pair with his mystery series book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information on today's flight and any other books that we talked about today. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are picking up next, especially if you have heard about the book on the show, please tag us. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. This is a brand new show, so if you enjoyed it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give the show a review. Your review not only helps me, but it also helps the show reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure that you will not miss an episode. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.